So, exposing yourself to combat, how to be board ready. I have never worked as hard as I have on the boards that I am on. It's as hard as the biggest and most complicated court cases I've argued, and I find going to court really hard. It's the hardest part of my law job. At the end of 2 and sometimes 3 days of board meetings, I am drained, I am exhausted. And the reason is this, because I've reflected on it and tried to figure out why. The reason is because as well as technical skills and being strategic and diverse thinking and commercial and understanding regulatory and government risk, which is bread and butter for me, it requires a lot of soft skills. It requires listening and careful communication and working with other directors and the chair and with the CEO and with the executive to get the best outcome for the organisation. You have to be part of the team, and you aren't in charge unless, of course, you're the chair, which for me is unusual because by the time most of us make it onto big boards, we're used to being the boss. So we're just used to telling people what to do. But if you can't tell people what to do, you have to work through other people. It's much harder. The second thing is that you need to do a long apprenticeship to get onto a major board. And then you need to start a long apprenticeship once you get onto the board to be any good at it. That apprenticeship, by the way, never ends. You never stand in the same room twice. As Heraclitus said, you have to read everything, including for context. You have to think about everything. And Prem, I will come to you for that, although Doug should talk about it because he reflects that a lot. You need to talk to a wide range of people. You need to know a lot of people. You need to join the dots. You need to see the clouds forming. You need to know where it's going to rain. And you need to make sure that the CEO and the management have an umbrella. You need to anticipate the future. You need to help your organisation be ready before the wave hits. 3, if you're visually diverse, then it can be harder. But that just means you need more help to communicate with your fellow directors and chairs and to be influential. You need to work harder to be an effective director, but don't stereotype. Learn to see with real eyes. It's often the pale, stale males who have helped me in my governance journey. They've appointed me. They've mentored me. They've given me a chance. So don't write them off, just as you don't want to be written off as a diverse director who's only there due to gender or being Indigenous or ethnic. And do not reject what they have to teach you. Yes, there is an old boys network. There is assimilation bias. There are also people, but there are also people at the top of their game who are so good, so strategic, who've got such great gut instinct, immaculate judgment calls, that you must learn from them. And many of them are pale, stale males. I've seen directors I've wanted to write. Sorry, can those of you who are not speaking, put yourself on mute. Jerry, you are not on mute. Thank you. Yes, there are some ineffectual directors as well, who take on too much, get there because they're a golfing buddy, but there are a lot of giants who I can never rival, but can teach me to be a better director if I'm willing to do the work and open to being taught and learning. Diversity is not about entitlement. Being the right gender or the right ethnicity is not a magic pill to effectiveness in the boardroom. It doesn't even necessarily mean you're the best person to speak to diversity, but it can be helpful and add value and give you insights that other people don't have. Now, the panel were selected. They're not random. These are people selected because they have wisdom to speak in this area. And the first person is Doug McKay, who has given me opportunities and been a mentor to me. He is the director and chair of the Bank of New Zealand board. He's a non-executive director of the National Australia Bank. He's director of Fletcher Building, Genesis Energy Limited. He's chair of the Eden Park Trust Board. He's a chartered member of the Institute of Directors. Marisa Fong brings many, many things, but she is the founder of Ani Skincare. She's also the co-founder of Madison Recruitment. So there's a recruitment angle to her expertise and her experience as well. She's a director of Masi Maya Limited, and she's on the panel of Competence and a board member of Simplicity KiwiSaver. Mark Tume is chairing his last Ngāi Tahu board meeting, but he'll be here at 12:30. He's chair of Infratil Limited, board member of Precinct Properties, Infratil Energy Australia, Victoria Energy. He's on New Zealand Railways Corporation and Transpower Finance Limited. Alison Barrass, director of Spark, GWA Group Limited, Rocket Global Limited, Zespri, chair of Babbage Wine Limited, chair of Tom and Luke. Prem is executive director of Lewis Creamery, Southern Pastures Management Limited, Foundation Capital Limited, New Zealand Grass Fed Limited, chair of Foundation Securities Limited, a co-director and co-owner of Manukau Pastures. And then Andrew Steele, who is consulting partner at Frank and Knowledge Hunters, and obviously is going to talk to us about what executive search people look for. So can I now ask those of you who are not speaking, Wayne Dwyer, you are not on mute. Could you please put yourselves on mute? Can I now just call on Doug to start, and then we will just flow through. So I think we'll have Doug, and then we'll have Alison, and then Marisa, and we'll have Prem, and we'll just keep rolling, and I'll weave it all together. So, Doug, can I acknowledge Doug McKay? This is Doug's session. This is his idea. The subject matter of this session is Doug's idea, and he is right. So that's why I put it up. Thank you, Doug.
Kia ora, Mai. Tēnā koutou katoa. Taku ingoa, Doug McKay, and it is my privilege to speak to you this morning. I was motivated to participate today, and in fact suggested the subject of exposing yourself to combat to get board ready. Just like to acknowledge the influence of Mr. Ed Arts, the former chairman of Procter & Gamble, and the influence he's had on my thinking here some 35 years ago, and still which lives with me today. Diversity is not sufficient to get you on boards. It's a value add. As the recent Superdiversity audit highlighted, it's about diverse thinking, not diversity. If you haven't read the audit recently, I encourage you to read it again or for the first time. Read what a range of various been there and done it directors think is diversity in the board context. Otherwise, we risk it being Groundhog Day again and again. Businesses are not about diversity for diversity's sake. The last two directors I have appointed, one took me 3 years to find, and one I'm currently working on is going to be 2 years. After exhaustive search, chairs are lucky to have a credible shortlist of 2 or 3 candidates who fit the brief. The credible director pool today is quite small. All the headhunters and search people will tell you that, and we need to increase this pool both vertically and horizontally. So hats off to Superdiversity for stepping up into that. I also heard in the last seminar, old white men should either move in attitude, was the context, I think, or if not, then move out of their board positions. I was offended by that, being in my mid-60s myself. I have never felt more able or ready to contribute to my organisations or mentor new and diverse directors as a board member or chair. And I keep getting reappointed with often 98% plus of shareholder votes. If the old white men move on, who is going to coach and mentor all the new diverse director talent coming through? My advice is nobody is going to roll over and wave you through onto a board with a free pass. I would rather earn my right to be there on merit and then let my diversity bring added value and richness to the board conversations. All of you have that diversity added value, there's no doubt about that. And I get all the angles where diversity is fantastic and a real enhancement to business culture and performance. I have read many of the studies, I get it, trust me. But not if you can't contribute expertly on the priorities for the business like customer, financial, risk, competitor, technology, regulatory, strategy, people, sustainability, and a myriad of other challenges every business must navigate. Often it comes at you like a fire hydrant, and you need to know what you are doing. Your board colleagues expect nothing less. Just to be clear, while I might be an old white guy, I consider myself from a diverse minority background. I am from West Auckland. I went to a low decile school. My mum worked in a hamburger joint and my dad was an office administrator. We lived in a state house and Black Power started in our street while I grew up there. I was the first in a now 6th generation New Zealand family to attend university. In my career, I have championed diversity. Some on this and the earlier calls are mentees of mine at some pivotal point in their career. In more recent times, I have championed a young Māori rangatira, Renata Blair, onto the Eden Park Trust Board, Mai Chen onto the BNZ Board, and recently Wendy Lai onto the IAG New Zealand Board. I appointed the now Dame Diane Robertson as the first female missioner of the Auckland City Mission over a decade ago. Kirsten Patterson into her first CEO gig with NZECA. Bridget Liddell into her first line general management role out of investment banking and corporate affairs. Alison Barrass into her first CEO role at Goodman Fielder. Vanessa Stoddart from corporate lawyer into a line human resources role. Patricia Reid, now the Deputy Chief Executive at Auckland Council. And Angie Mentis to her first CEO role here at the BNZ. I have a 20-year track record on this stuff at least. So no, I am not biased or narrow or talking my own book. I do walk the talk and I have learned some things. Which brings me to my point. Diversity is not enough a reason to get you on the best boards. It is incredible and admired that you might be diverse and bring rich cultural traditions and other experiences. Board appointments are subject to a skills analysis and matching those to the gaps on the board and the context in which the organisation operates. A headline in the Superdiversity audit I referenced earlier says, skills remain a prerequisite for appointing diverse thinking directors. So what would I suggest you all focus on rather than diversity? Get yourselves into a position where your diversity is a wonderful bonus, that it's a given. It's through sustained exposure to combat is how you get board ready. I served a long board apprenticeship, as did my board colleagues speaking today. When younger, I served on a school board, a charity board, a sports club committee, an NGO, a professional membership board, multiple subsidiary boards, joint venture boards, startups, government boards, advisory boards, private company boards, which have led me to my now current portfolio of blue chip boards. I served a long apprenticeship in combat situations, learning my craft as well as an executive career in large corporates. It was a 30-year journey when I look back, preparing me for a fulfilling last 10 years in governance. You might be familiar with Malcolm Gladwell and his concept of 10,000 hours to get mastery. I think of boards like that. The director candidates who practice really doing it are most likely going to become the best at it and be in demand to join more boards. Get yourself into careers, jobs, roles and boards where you can practice like an Olympic athlete so that it is obvious when you are ready and able to deliver your career best performances. And we will have a pipeline of future diverse directors who have spent time in the combat zone learning and assimilating relevant experience. Ask yourself, how will you improve a business or organization's performance? Because I am diverse or have done the courses is not enough. It is a safe assumption that everyone on this call has a high level of intelligence, ability, and personal ambition. As I see it, some of you will make it onto the serious boards you aspire to, and some won't. I am here today because I got worried listening to the last seminar that most of you won't. And I want to challenge you, give you some insight and help you plan your board and personal journey. I haven't said much about the personal attributes required, so just a few thoughts before I finish. Attitude is everything. An attitude that is professional, and by that I mean mastery of the fundamentals, which requires great sacrifice and endless repetition, along with hard work over time, where no experience or grunt work is too menial if that helps build mastery. An attitude that is resilient. Your career will be full of knocks and disappointments, as will your life. How you get back up and find ways to succeed and learn from these setbacks is key. And an attitude that sees winning as a way of life, not at any cost, but goal-oriented and very deliberate in its execution. Always aim to beat the competition, beat the target, beat the benchmarks, beat the deadlines. And then there are the skills. The three most important skills are communication, strategic thinking, and prioritization. Prioritization might surprise you, but by that I mean to distinguish and focus energy on those things that would produce a real impact and the right things. The best directors and managers, for that matter, prioritize ruthlessly. Communication. Most of us are terrible at this. Can you think, write, and speak clearly, forcefully, concisely, and be to the point? When graduates joined Procter & Gamble, and we were the largest recruiter of graduates from the best business schools globally in my decade there, your first 3 months in the company was spent learning how to communicate well. It's very hard, but an important skill. You might have heard the saying, I don't have time to write you a short paper, so I will write you a long one. Find the time to write short ones and don't waste your and others' time. And then strategic thinking. Are you a strategic thinker? You can and you should be. You aren't born being one. You can acquire and learn these skills, and it is critical for people on boards as it is right through their careers. Strategic thinking is complex and is about hard choices, competitive advantage, and marshalling resources to execute strategy, which is the work of boards. Think strategically about every decision in your life and read the academic writers on it and become really good. I hope you found this stimulating, straight up and honest, even if a little controversial. Thank you for taking the time to be on the call. Being interested and having a passion to participate is a good place to start doing what I am suggesting, which is spend more time in the combat zone. Good luck. You're on mute, mate.
Okay, so thanks so much for that, Doug. Prem, I just wonder if you could speak to the fact that you say, I think many people picture directorship as a bed of roses, but often decisions are made in the eye of the storm and stakeholders and media will judge you later with perfect 2020 hindsight. Can you withstand that kind of pressure? Do you want to speak to that and also respond to anything Doug or I said?
Yeah, sure. So I guess firstly, I want to reaffirm everything that Doug has said in many ways. I guess I get concerned with so many people wanting to be directors. I think a lot of people see directors as a easy gig, and it isn't really. And I also get concerned with a lot of people think that just because they come from because they're female or they come from a different cultural background, that they immediately have something to contribute. That's not the case, really. That gives you something additional to contribute, but you need a thorough background in management. You need to have done your apprenticeship in understanding all the risks and opportunities that exist in business, and especially risks. You need to have understood all those things. So what I mean by that statement is, so when you're sitting at the board level or at senior management level, you have to make decisions based on the facts that are known to you at that time. So that's what I mean by the eye of the storm. So if you look at all the big events that have happened, look at the Christchurch earthquake, you look at the global financial crisis, or before then the Asian crisis, or the tsunami, or even the election of Trump and all the upheaval that he brought. Or if you look at the current geopolitical crisis that's happening between and if you look at interest rate rises, all those things have major implications on your business, and all those things will blow up, and you have to make decisions. Something may go wrong. You might have a factory fire, so you have to make decisions for your business based on only those facts that are known at that point in time. So you will make a decision, but in future, your shareholders and the media will actually judge you based on perfect vision, because they will then know, decision A would have led to one outcome, decision B would have led to another outcome. You might have made decision A, but decision B might have led to a better outcome, and the media will then judge you for having made the wrong decision. So you need to be strong in yourself to be able to withstand the pressure of actually making the decision that you know is the right decision based on the facts available to you at that point in time. So you need to have that strength in yourself to be able to make decisions based on the facts that are known to you at that time. Okay, so that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, Marisa, I just note that you have written some great stuff about the soft skills that you need. And before, when I was talking about why I get so exhausted, the hard skills and the technical skills are not the issue. The soft skills are actually quite hard. So did you want to elaborate on your calm, thoughtful demeanour, emotions under control, confidence, a point of view evidencing thought around the company / organisation and challenges, enthusiasm, capacity to contribute, engagement and willingness to work?
Yeah, so I think Doug touched on it about communication skills. It's what we call reading the room, right? So in the background, a little bit what Prem said, what are the strategic things you need to be thinking about, but how do you keep your emotions under control? Because often in those crisis situations, emotions are running high. And I've noticed when I've been in rooms where there is high emotion evident and you can see people are angry or frustrated or whatever, that, nobody's listening to each other. So because, everybody's just focused on what's happening to them and their own experience and visceral reaction to things. So when I interview, and I was doing this for a board not so long ago, interviewed a director and looking at what I admired about the people, what was coming across was their communication style that I was experiencing in a reasonably high stress situation. I mean, certainly as you get more senior in your career, perhaps those sorts of situations don't faze you as much, but definitely it's still an unnatural situation being interviewed, particularly maybe even as you get more senior because you do less of it. So I like to see how people conduct themselves. How do they communicate? How thoughtful are their answers? How prepared are they? And so when I see this kind of calmness, that nice calm demeanor, nothing phases them. They have techniques and tips for just thinking through something if they're not prepared for a question. So that tells me a lot about how they might perform in a really highly emotive situation. So I think if you're naturally a very exuberant person, if you're naturally a very expressive person, just being really cognizant that when you're in a boardroom, and it depends on what size and of directors, that goes a long way. The communication style, being really listening to people, thinking, and then being able to do that quite quickly, and being really upfront if you don't have an answer, or being really upfront and not afraid to say, hey, look, I don't know what the right way forward is right now, or contributing something in a way that's respectful, because I see people also in boardrooms getting very, as I said, emotional about something and talking over the top of people. So this is where the chair comes in. really good chairs I've seen who manage that so well, and then really poor chairs who just lose control of the room. And so, yeah, this is kind of where the soft skills come in as both a chair or a director. You know, do you have the influence? Do you have the ability to control a room? Do you have the ability to read a room? And do you have the ability personally to express yourself in a way that's rational, that's in a highly emotive situation sometimes? Or, yeah, just I guess those kind of the soft skills that I think are really important.
That's great. And Alison Barrass, I'm about to come to you to ask you about the different skills for different types of boards, whether that's private, whether that's commercial boards, whether that's government boards or not-for-profit. But Mark Tume is on. So, Mark, you've just been chairing your last Ngāi Tahu board meeting. So talk to me about how you got where you got. Because a lot of people would say to you, oh, aren't you just there because you're the ethnic tick? And clearly that's not the case. If it was all that simple, Mai, it was all that simple. Talk to me about your training and the skills and the apprenticeship that you did to get where you currently are. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mai, and kia ora tātou, everybody. What a big audience. I've got you all split up on my screen, so it's a little bit overwhelming. I haven't come from a board where I've just been looking at one room. Yeah, that's a really, that's my journey was one, I think, as much luck as skill, to be fair. There was a certain amount of luck involved in this. I'd been now an independent director for nigh on 20 years. And when I was first approached to consider independent director, I had been working in an investment organisation. Unfortunately, many of you will remember back in the 80s and 90s, or some of you may not, you look awfully young. Back in Doug McKay doesn't, but anyhow, back in the 80s and 90s, you'll remember that they used to have these talking heads on when everyone was interested in the stock market. And unfortunately, I was asked to do a couple of those and got rung up and said, hey, we really love what you're doing. Could you consider becoming a board member? And I did. And I was working with a business that I was also a shareholder in and was also a board member of. So that gave me the latitude to do that. So it was a real confluence of the opportunity, but also being in a position where I wasn't a full-time employee. And if I could just speak to that, May, one of the things that I've learned over this period is a really, really critical. I had 4 C's for sort of directors to consider, and the top one is capacity. And it is, I have found it tremendously difficult, and others who may be on the call who are full-time employees, can be tremendously difficult if you haven't got the capacity and the time to put into being a director. So long story short, you go onto one board, people say, really love what you're saying, Mark, would you consider another board? And it just kind of grew from there. But at some point, at a point, I had to make a call about whether I wanted to do this on a more full-time basis, because it was starting to become a capacity issue. So I think, for people listening in on this, you have to be very, very certain that you have the capacity to take these roles on board, because there is a lot more work. And over the 20 years, I'm sure Doug will agree with me on this, over the 20 years, the workload has just got heavier. So what's actually happened over the 20 years is my workload's got heavier, and the number of boards I'm taking on has got less because of the work, literally because of the workload.
Yeah, but Mark, what they really want to know is how you got that lucky. How do you create a situation where people say to you, hey, that's really great, why don't you come on another board? What is it about you, buddy? What is that? Because it isn't magic, there's no pills. That's what we've been telling people.
Okay, here's the sad truth. I'm pretty sure the first board I went on, people's jaws hit the floor when they realised I was a moulding. I don't think they realised that first off. It was actually... if you look at some of the skills that people are after around board tables now, and it goes to the skills matrix, HS&E skills are a big one, cyber security, a big one, new business models, tech-enabled business models is another big one, all of those sorts of skills. I just happen to be at a time and place where treasury management skills and financial risk management was at its sort of zenith, and people were after that as a gap filler in their skills matrix. And so actually the diversity issue wasn't, sad to say, back in the day, it wasn't such a big thing. It was more about, here's our skills matrix, how do we fill this gap? Whereas now it's more nuanced. It's not only the skills, it's not only the skill gap, it's actually to do with the diversity, and particularly the diversity of thinking as well.
Excellent. So, Mark, in terms of those other questions, were there any ones that you wanted to respond to?
I think, yeah, if I could, the effective director thing is really important. I've got these kind of, without wanting to sound too glib, I've got these 4 C's, I call them. And the first one is capacity. Actually, when I look at new directors for any of the boards I'm on, the first question I ask, assuming they get through, the integrity tests and the personality tests and all the rest of that, is about capacity. Have they got the capacity to actually do the job? That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I refer to it as care, only because it starts with a C, but care. Do you really care about this business? Do you care about the organisation? Will you go the extra mile? That goes to a whole bunch of questions, care. The third point would be courage. And, when you're sitting around a board table, you want everyone to contribute. So you want people to have enough courage to ask. And I'll put it this way. I've asked many of these in my career as a director. You've got to have the courage to ask the dumb question. You don't sit around there going, oh, my God, am I going to sound really dumb asking this question? Because often those are the questions, when you start peeling back the onion, that are the really, really vital questions. Because I guarantee if you ask the dumb question, someone else on that board will go, oh, thank goodness, Mark asked that question. I can see Prem laughing because he's done it a lot, I know. It's that having courage. So you cannot afford to sit around a board table and be effectively a shrinking violet. You've got to have the courage, and I can best describe it as courage to ask a really dumb question. What feels like you to be a dumb question, that's always the test. Are you the type of person that would be willing to ask that question? And my last C is curiosity. It's being a director, you've got to be constantly learning about new things. And I think, the issue for me at the moment, I'm doing quite a bit of my own research on software-defined networks. Now, it's sort of a bit of a mind blender, but those of you involved in telecommunications know where that's sort of going. But it's something that I'm not familiar with, and yet I'm doing a lot of kind of research off my own bat because I know I've got to get my head around that to be able to contribute to some of the decisions that have been made on boards that I'm on. And so there's a lot of that sort of research work. So I come back to that capacity question. If you overlay your capacity with not only just reading board packs, but actually getting to grips with some of the more technical issues. And by the way, that's just the way I do it, right? So you're just getting my view here. I often say to new directors on my boards that when I'm reading a board pack, I'm normally reading 2 or 3 packs at the same time from the same board, because papers you get in a board pack have context, and that context will be in other board packs and other board papers, and you have to have those to bring yourself up to speed on what's being argued in the latest board pack. So I might just stop there, May.
No, it's fantastic. I'm just going to ask you one more question, but I am going to pick up on that because it's you, and it's also Malcolm Gladwell, and it's the thing we all know. I mean, basically, if you're going to be any good at anything, you just got to work at it. Look, finally, is being Maori, has that brought you benefits by being on a board? Has it given you perspectives and views that you wouldn't have otherwise had because you are a Maori director and a Maori chair?
I think, there's a really interesting answer to this that's possibly more cultural. So if you take Māori and Polynesian people in general, people say to me, how come you don't get stressed? You know what I mean? You just, you can compartmentalize, and I think one of the benefits of being Māori and a Polynesian background is that we view things. Well, I'd like to think this might be a gross generalisation. When I look at my family, when I look at the whānau, we are more relaxed. We don't stress on things to the same degree that, say, some of my other colleagues do. So I think there's a tremendous sort of genetic advantage to that. Interestingly enough, in my early career, so this is going back into the early 2000s, probably not, but it has become increasingly important as to ao Māori and appreciation of diversity. And that's not just Māori, that's If you look at the Maker Asian population, if you look at Pacific Island population, there's an awful lot of South Africans actually circulating, around in New Zealand through that sort of migrationary period as well. An appreciation of the issues that they may have faced getting to where they are, particularly in Aotearoa, that's actually been of tremendous benefit to me as well. So it's not just jumping to the immediate conclusion; it's trying to unpick what's driving some of the sort of conversation and points that are being made. So that would probably be my observations.
Yeah, no, that's great, Mark. Thanks so much. So, Alison, coming back to you, we've been talking about all of these things, mainly focused on commercial boards, some focused on government boards. We haven't really talked about not-for-profit boards, but you raised with me the good issue that we can't presume that all of the skills are all the same for all boards. So, just want to talk about what's the same and what's different between the different boards?
Sure. I mean, I think when you look at the skills required, there are skills that you need to be a director, and then there are the skills that you bring as an individual to any board or venture that you're involved with. And I think that a lot of the skills that you need as a director are common regardless of the type of board. You have to understand commercial drivers, even if it's a not-for-profit. And I chaired the Breast Cancer Research Trust board for a number of years, and one of the most important things for us was fundraising and managing our outgoings in the context of the money we could raise to pay for them. So you cannot get away from the fact that you have to understand commercial drivers if you want to be in governance. And to not be across that is really to put yourself, I think, in quite a vulnerable position on a board where you potentially aren't able to contribute to things that either potentially put the business at risk or put you at risk as a director. So for people here who are interested in boards and interested in companies, you really need to make sure that you're across the financial piece of governance. But then when you look across different environments, there's definitely different levels of different skills required. So from my experience when I was involved with a government board, the stakeholder management was a huge piece of that relationship. Stakeholder management is always important in governance, but I think on different boards that can, be even more important in terms of how a board gets things done and how a board actually manages to move things forward. And, I think in governance as a board, what you're always trying to do is move the business forward in a positive direction, in a strategic direction and a positive direction that actually improves business and improves, the benefits to stakeholders and shareholders. So, you have to think about how good are you at patience and stakeholder management and, listening to different perspectives, depending on who the stakeholders are, and really being willing to hear what other people have to say. Whereas, I also sit on some private equity boards, and the financial drivers, the drivers of what they're trying to achieve with those businesses are often quite different. So while you still need a good suite of skills, you just have to be absolutely commercially sharp, and you have to understand the primary owner's objectives of being in that business and how you as a director can support those objectives. So when you're looking at joining different boards, you're evaluating what is my core governance skill set, what are the particular things that I bring to a board, either because of my diverse background or my different experience and skills, and then what is the board looking for? What does a board in this sector actually need in terms of governance contribution? And I think that the other thing to think about is that from a board perspective, I don't think there's any room for egos around the board table. I think that when you look at how the best decisions are made, certainly from my experience, it's where people have the opportunity to really contribute a strong individual perspective, but then are able to put their egos to one side and come to really good collective decision making. Because conflict, debate around the board table is fabulous. Conflict and fallout around the board table is really devastating for businesses. So you also, in that soft skill area, have to really think about how good are you at listening? How willing are you to evolve your views on things? How strongly do you feel? And do you feel so strong that you're not prepared to move? In which case, how much use are you really going to be to your colleagues around the board table and to a business that needs to keep moving forward and that needs to evolve? So, yeah, I hope that answers the question, but that's my perspective.
No, that was excellent. Now, Andrew, I'm coming to you, but can I just quickly go around the other directors? I want your best couple of shots on how it is you keep board effective. Sometimes people think, wow, I've managed it, I'm now on a board, and then they eat their legs and they just vegetate. There are some species in animaldom, as you know, once they attach to a rock, that's it, they eat everything out, they don't need their brain, they just stop. And we've seen directors like that. So how do you guys continue to keep board effective? I mean, so I'm going to go to Doug first, because he does that in spades, and then Mark will go to you, and then we'll just go around, Marisa, etc. Doug, do you want to comment first, and then I'll go to Mark?
Well, I like to think I've got subject matter expertise in the areas that matter for this business. That's why I'm on the board. So I generally try to offer as much of that as I can. And then the other thing I do as a chair, when I reflect on it, I help the CEO manage his or her relationship with the board. CEOs don't learn how to, work with a board at university or in management on the way up that much. They really get thrown in the deep end when they become the CEO. So helping a CEO manage a pathway with the board that's constructive to all the things Alison said, because when it's not a good relationship between the board members or the CEO, that's really difficult, and you've got to change something fairly fundamental. So those are the two things I tend to focus on personally.
Sure, thanks. Mark, talk to me about how you stay match fit as a director and as a chair.
So I sort of covered part of that off. It's a constant learning. So come back to the curiosity part, right? There's a constant learning thing. And to Doug's point, if you look at banking, he's on the board of BNZ. The technology, the impact of technology, new business, tech-enabled new business models is going to be unbelievable in that space. And so what I find is I have to keep my own personal research up in specific areas, because you'll get presented with papers by management who sort of sometimes make the assumption that you're across the subject matter to the detail that's required to make an effective decision. Coming back to Alison and Doug's point, if I just cover that off, it's incredibly important, I think, that the chair has a large role in this, is moulding, if you like, the sum of the parts of a board into something that creates a greater whole. Right? There is a secret sauce to high-performing boards. And if I was to sort of unpick part of that, it would be where there's real trust between the directors, amongst the directors with themselves, and amongst the directors and the management team, and particularly amongst the directors and the CEO. And that is the only time that you can get sort of constructive conversation where opposing or contrary views can be openly discussed. And I say this, can't underemphasize it, in a non-threatening manner. So it has to be a safe environment for those discussions to take place. And, I come back to my sort of earlier comments. If you combine courage to participate with that sort of trust, you're going to get really good decision-making at that point. It is, again, I come back to, you want everyone participating, and what you find is that the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts, and you get sort of in a virtual flywheel momentum situation.
Yeah, great. So Marisa, moulding together so that the sum is greater than the parts. You've known that in a chair's role, but also how you do that when you've got people who are diverse thinkers and people from more ethnicities. Give us some wisdom.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, I think, that point I made, and a few of everyone's made actually, is the power of the chair, how good that the chair is, and if he's not or she's not, what do you do, right? So it comes back to, again, courage. Like, well, does someone has to step up and take a de facto role? So I think with diversity and ethnicity, we are used to seeing things through different lenses, right? We're used to having a foot in each camp, you know, where we've had to kind of mold and adapt ourselves to fit a world that maybe wasn't built for us. So I think in that situation, we have some skills in being able to just not accept the status quo, because we've had to adapt and been in two different worlds. We know how to change and maybe mold things, but being very, again, it goes back to the art of facilitation without, and having that safety and trust in the room and in yourself. Because I think, and it goes back to courage, and I think this Mark sums this up really well, if you have the courage of your convictions and you believe, but you also are looking for the greater good, then, and your intentions are right, then that's when that power is really, you feel the energy to do it, but you've also got to be prepared to walk away. And this goes back a bit to what Alison was saying, you know, if you're, you know, you can't have ego, but you've also got to know why you're there and what you're there for. And if it's not happening, then you've got to be able to say, hey, this is not happening, and not hang on to something, as you say, just to sit on a rock because I finally got an appointed role onto a board. I'm hanging in here come hell or high water. You've got to know when to walk away as well if it's broken. If the thing is broken, get out. And it's dysfunctional, get out. And so, yeah, it's the prize is not to be on the board. The prize is to be contributing and functional and actually driving the thing forward to the reason it exists, you know.
So, Alison, you've been a highly effective director and a highly effective chair. Do you want to summarise in 3 key points what makes you that way from a lived experience, combat exposed, at the coalface perspective? And then I'm coming to you, Prem.
Yeah, so look, I think in terms of a chair, being an effective chair, there are a few things that you need to do for starters. Like the first, in my view, is you need to understand the business. You need to understand it either because, as Doug said, you've got previous experience that, you know, gives you a depth of knowledge and insight into that business that you can pull on, or you need to understand it because you really put the work in, as Mark said, to understand it well. And I'm across, you know, a range of businesses, some of which are in my previous career area and some of which are completely new to me. And, you know, particularly on businesses that are new to me, you have to do the work as a chair. If you're trying to have conversations with the management or with the CEO or even with the rest of the board and you don't know what you're talking about and you're failing from day one, you just have to make sure that you know what the business is about, how it needs to operate and how it needs to deliver its plan, how it can deliver its plan. The next thing for an effective chair, in my view, is you must be a really good listener. A chair role is a really interesting role because it's not, in real terms, a leadership role. You're actually a facilitator of a room of equals around the board table. And I think chairs that go in understanding that they have high influence, but ultimately the responsibility to make sure that everybody contributes and that they get all the views on the table and that they then take people along the journey with them are some of the factors that make outstanding chairs. And for me, the final piece is that you really need to understand how to manage relationships. You have to be able to influence. You have to be able to bring people along, to encourage, to coach people. You've got to have difficult conversations. If people aren't performing around the board table, like in life, you have to be able to say, you're not performing, you need to change, evolve, or go. And a chair needs to manage all those things with like a double pair of kid gloves on, because you're in a room with very successful, usually very highly paid, you know, highly rewarded people who've been told all their life that they are brilliant at everything. And you have to manage all of that to get everybody to really contribute at their highest level, to move people out if they're not contributing, and to always have the best interests of the organisation at heart. So it takes a number of hard skills, but also a large number of soft skills and exceedingly good listening, negotiation, persuasion, all of those things to be really effective.
Fantastic. Prem, you said, quote, the opposite of diverse thinking is monocultural groupthink. The most infamous and disastrous example of this was the Bay of Pigs invasion. Chairs and directors owe it to their shareholders and stakeholders to encourage diversity, but this is not only in the makeup of the boards, but also in the senior management. In the end, we will not have diversity pools for boards if we don't have enough senior management with the right experiences. I believe that companies that adopt diversity will adapt to our fast evolving world and therefore succeed. It is a Darwinian law. It's not the strongest as a species that survives, but rather that which is most adaptable to change. Would you like to make one last comment? You're on mute, dear.
Sure, just to, I guess, reaffirm what Alison was saying. To start off with, so in terms of the chair's role, the key role is to obviously facilitate everyone around the board and to make sure that the diverse views ahead. So particularly when you have people of different cultures around the board, and I think Mark can probably reaffirm to this as well, is sometimes people from different cultural backgrounds are quite shy about getting their views across. And if you've got a board made up of people from different backgrounds, sometimes those views might not actually be heard because you will have some very forceful personalities around who will talk a lot and will start to dominate. So, and as Alison has said, once you actually get a board, and if that board actually has conflict or too many people dominating, and if that domination comes through and that view starts to, if everyone starts to agree with just that view, and that's where the Bay of Pigs invasion came through, is that everyone said, yes, that's a great idea, it'll work. And of course, it didn't work. The world around us is changing very, very fast. We need to adapt. And the best way to adapt is to make sure that all the different views ahead, that we are listening to what's happening to us around the community, what's happening to us in terms of climate change to the planet. Obviously with what's happening with the pandemic at the moment is a great example. How are we going to open our businesses, how we deal with the small percentage who are unvaccinated. All those things are quite important considerations for businesses to work through. And we need to take everyone's views and adapt. And we can't do it if we don't take everyone's views into consideration. And for us to have a pool of talent coming through, it's not just the board. We need to actually look at senior management because that's where the pool will come through. And as we discussed at the start, it's the senior management expertise that will allow us to develop the pool of directors. Mark and I have got similar background, and our experience comes from what we've done in our management experience. We didn't train to be directors. We trained to be managers. So
fantastic. And Mark, final word?
Sorry, yes. Apologies, everybody. This would have been such a fantastic thing to spend more time on, May, but I do have to go. But I've got a fun factoid, since we're talking about diversity, a fun factoid. So I think Infratil is the only NZX 10 company that in the role of CE and chairman filled by tangata whenua. There we go. I'll leave you with that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark. Andrew, I'm just coming to you now. And so, sorry, I'm just trying to make people go away. So, Andrew, you've said it's becoming a must-have and has been for some time, diversity in the broadest sense. What does that mean in terms of executive search now, Andrew? And then just warning you, Doug, I'm coming to you to ask whether this seminar has put things back on track. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, look, I think that all the points made so far are really valid. To find best talent for boards, the context is critical. Doug made that early on. The skills, knowledge, and experience, the old matrix, is still a well utilised tactic and still really, really important. If I look at Mark's For C's, I've added a couple on there because I think the capacity of someone to take on board roles, and we've had a number of examples when I've been in executive roles where we have board members probably, have too much going on and therefore aren't applying themselves fully to the role they are sitting in, and I've seen that and observed it. The care is all about the passion for the role. Mark mentioned that as well. I think that's really, really important. The being brave is related to Mark's courage, and someone who is very open-minded to the change that, Prem related to the kind of things that are going on in the environment, external.
Hello, just put my key.
Sorry, please put yourself on mute, whoever that is. Thank you.
The other two C's I'd like to add to Mark's one is calmness and composure, and again that was mentioned before. I think seeing somebody in a board environment who isn't calm and isn't composed, especially at chair level as well. Again, I've observed that, and it's not a great sight. So those kind of things are really critical from my perspective. The other thing, I guess, point we're trying to make is that, being found is really important. Your work, Mai, and the Superdiversity work and finding those 100 extra people, there's a bundle of folk out there. I do work for Foundation North, and the people on that board of trustees incredible. The diversity is immense, and they are being found. So it's a matter of finding how you can get yourself profiled in a way which will enable selection search people to find you and understand you, and so highly recommend that it's just not your LinkedIn profile. It's more than that.
Thank you. So, Doug McKay, are we back on track?
I hope we are, May, because it's a very important subject and there's a lot of people listening in who are very passionate about trying to succeed in this space over time. I just repeat, for me, board readiness is about exposing yourself to combat. Prem said it, about being a manager first before you can then aspire to be a board director or being a business owner or being an entrepreneur. Becoming expert, you becoming the best public law lawyer in New Zealand, and then people were interested in putting you on their boards to tap your knowledge and expertise. So the young people on the call, people are thinking about being directors in the future. You've got to put the mahi in. It's got to be 20 or 30 years of mahi, and find ways to practice being a board member in other contexts where the risks aren't so high and where you're likely to be given an early opportunity to ply your trade. Diversity on its own is just not enough. It's a fantastic value add. It's not an entitlement to get on a board because you're diverse. You have to earn the right to be there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Okay, Howard, you get 2 minutes to wrap.
Thanks, Mai. Look, I really wanted to recognise the contributions that she made today, and I think there's some really important points that I've noted down. So first, Prem, thank you for imparting your knowledge and experience and highlighting the need to be, really well read and be across the broad range of commercial, economic, political, and even geopolitical issues that we face. Also, how you encourage all people from different ethnic backgrounds to be heard. But also how everyone needs to be heard on some of the key issues of the day and some of the complex issues that we face actually as a country over the next 3 to 6 months. Marisa, no surprise, given your experience, how well you can actually read a room. That's such an important trait, and it never can be underestimated. And I can see how well you can manage and guide the culture of the board. So thank you for your contribution. Mark, I don't think he's there anymore, but just wanted to say, look, I think a key lesson from him is really being knowledgeable and experienced on the skills of the day. So thank you for his insights and those valuable 4 C's that he imparted to us. Alison, thank you for your comments as well about how to navigate between different types of boards, what their drivers actually are and what they require. Also,
I love the double kid gloves.
Yes. And also highlighting the key personality traits that have to be consistent across all the different boards that you're on, and there's so much the need to be authentic. May, thank you very much and you and your team for coordinating all this. But I think last words for Doug, that you really started off this meeting, woke us all up, and I think your honesty And the recalibration you actually provide us has set us everyone actually on the right path. So thank you for your contribution. So just wanted to finish off by saying, ngā mihi nuhi, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā tau e whā, mera kirihimete, matewa.
Well done. That was pretty impressive. Well, I'm so pleased that we had the chance to do this, and I hope that you will take this away. We have this taped. We're going to play the tape. We're going to bring together the comments of the panel. We're going to put them online. This was a recalibration. Please help us to make sure that effectiveness, that diversity in boardrooms is truly effective, and that we don't undermine it by people misunderstanding what it means. Thank you so much. Hei kōna. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Ka kite.